Welcome to another episode, everyone. These individuals killed their cellmates in prison on camera. And this is why you have to stay free of prison. Now, let's jump right into it. Viewer discretion is advised.
I did sadistically, premeditatedly, deliberately tortured and murdered Yvette Pena. I don't have no sympathy. I'm sadistic. I really don't care. I'll do it and I'll do it again over and over and over.
2019, Jaime Osuna was transferred to Courtroom State Prison while serving a life sentence for the brutal murder of Yvette Pena. Unknown to authorities, this would turn out to be a deadly mistake that will cost the life of an inmate. These are inmates who brutally killed cellmates on camera.
Shocking security camera video from inside a jail in London, Ontario. Video that shows a murder that the guards apparently did not notice.
October 31st, 2013, Anthony George consumed a full toilet bowl of jailhouse alcohol and started holding his cellmate in a chokehold. Although prison guards separated them, they didn't know that the shocking crime that was about to happen would cost them their jobs. Anthony George, a 32-year-old inmate at the Elgin Middlesex Detention Center in London, Ontario, had a long history of violent behavior, as well as an early life marked by hardship and trauma. Born into the Kettle Point First Nation, he began drinking at just 11 years old, a habit that escalated following his parents' separation. Then, a year later, his life would take...
Drinking at 11 years old, yes, you got problems already. He has mental problems. I'm not a psychologist, but he has problems if you're drinking or getting drunk and you're addicted at 11 years old. That's not good. So yeah, he's going to grow up to be rather violent. Let's see what this dude then did, man. Apparently he killed his Celly.
A darker turn when he found his mother had died by suicide, hanging from a rope. The pain of that moment stayed with him, worsening his struggle with alcohol, anger, and violence, which would later play a role in the terrible crime he commits. George's criminal record included multiple offenses, and he was known for his aggressive behavior. Despite all those warnings, he was placed in a cell with Adam Cargis, a 29-year-old man arrested for fraud and denied bail after the court discovered he was still using drugs. The decision would prove to be fatal. October 31st, 2013, George consumed a significant amount of jailhouse brew, an improvised alcoholic mixture made by fermenting fruit. He also smoked a cigarette laced with PCP, a powerful drug known to cause violent outbursts and psychotic behavior. A nurse on duty at the jail noticed that George...
Yes, there are drugs behind bars. You make alcohol, so-called pruno, call it pruno behind the walls, or white lightning, which is pure alcohol. You turn the pruno into pure alcohol and it gets you real intoxicated, gets you real loaded. And then they said he didn't had a PCP stick on top of that. So yeah, he's loaded. He's out of his mind. And now he's in a cell with this individual. A powder keg waiting to burst.
Was unusually loud and happy. Suspecting he was intoxicated, she would report her concerns to the guards. But due to a staffing shortage, they decided to wait until the next morning to address the issue. Instead of being monitored, George was locked inside a cell with Cargis. Surveillance later released to the media captures the brutal killing that takes place inside this cell. The video shows George attacking Cargis repeatedly over the course of an hour. He punched, kicked, stomped, and choked him, while Cargis's face was pressed against the glass window of the cell door. Also, at one point during this, a guard walks past the cell door and doesn't seem to notice what's going on. Other inmates witnessed this assault, with some...
This is the checks that the guards do every 30 minutes or every 15 minutes, depending on where you're at, perhaps every once an hour. But they come by, they look inside of your cell, they do a count. Some of these times it's a count, some of these times it's just to look in for this reason, to make sure you're okay, to make sure you're not in your cell being murdered. And if you are, to stop it, to save your life. Instead, this individual walks by, clearly just doing a surface check. Not really, he just barely glanced at the window, just kept going so he can write it in his log that he did a check. but obviously didn't really do a check. Because if you really did a check, if you stopped and looked in the windows like you're supposed to, you would see someone is in there losing their life, and you could have saved his life because at this time he was not dead. He's in there on his way to death.
Hanging on their cell windows to get the guards' attention, and others cheering on George. Despite all the commotion and the fact that the attack was visible through a security camera, no guards intervened. In fact, earlier that day, George had been seen putting Kargas in a chokehold multiple times, both in their cell and in the common area, in full view of the other inmates and surveillance cameras. At one point at 3:46 p.m., guards did intervene.
So the officer is right there as this dude is choking him out. And then later on, at some point, they go inside of the cell and he chokes him out and clearly, obviously, chokes him to death or beats him to death or both or what have you. But the officer is right there at this juncture, they should be separated and not be put in a cell together. Once you see the inmate choking out another one, you must separate the two inmates that have the conflict in order to minimize the threat of life. But instead, you see him choking them out and you put them back inside of the same cell together. This is ludicrous, and it led to this man's death.
They noticed the chokehold, but they failed to separate the two men or even take any preventative action. It would be hours after this that George launched his deadly attack inside the cell. And as this lasted about an hour, no one would try to stop him. By the next morning, George had successfully concealed Kargas's body inside the cell. He then exited and enlisted the help of other inmates to clean up the blood and dispose of the body.
So this is the next morning. So no officer saw anything that day, that night. He in there beating him, kicking him, choking him. He's on a door, clearly, obviously screaming for his life. At some point he was hollering or something. Nobody heard anything. Well, obviously the inmates did, but they did nothing. As you can see, they're now helping their accessories or something. They're helping to get rid of the evidence, get rid of the body. This is the body of the individual that was unalived inside of the cell. They're now pulling out the next morning. And let's see what they're about to do with the body, man. This is crazy.
The surveillance shows George wrapping Kargas's corpse in a bedsheet and dragging it into the shower area. Other inmates would assist in covering up this evidence, moving quickly and efficiently without attracting the attention of the guards. At around
This shit, they all working together. They all working in unison shit. They don't clean their houses this damn fast. They cleaning up all the evidence. Y'all in trouble. This shit is okay. Do y'all understand that there's cameras up in there?
10 a.m. on November 1st, 2013, guards finally discovered Kargas's lifeless body in the shower area. They called in paramedics, but he was long dead. The postmortem would show that Kargas had died from blunt force trauma to the head, neck, and face. His injuries were so bad they could only identify him through his tattoos. The extent of that beating led to...
Damn. They can only identify him through his tattoos. So, dude, I mean, think about that. He's unrecognizable. This is how bad this dude done beat him to death. Blunt force trauma. Yeah, you think? He had him in there all night, beating on him. This dude is unrecognizable. This is sadistic.
Serious criticisms about the lack of supervision and even the failure of the guards to intervene despite the clear warning signs. So following the discovery of Kargas's body, George was charged with second-degree murder. He was initially scheduled to be tried by jury, but the case and much of the evidence collected by homicide investigators never made it to trial because he made a surprise guilty plea just as his 3-week trial was set to begin. October 7th, 2016, George is given life in prison with no possibility of parole for 10 years. During the sentencing, George explained why he was extremely violent, and that's because a guard wouldn't let him make a phone call. This would trigger a rage inside him that he eventually took out on Kargas. The judge presiding over this case described the murder as brutal and stated that the level of violence used was beyond anything the court had seen before. However, the repercussions of Cargus's brutal murder didn't end at George's sentencing. This detention center came under heavy scrutiny for its failure to protect the killing. 6 jail staff members were fired for neglecting their duties, as they had failed to check on the inmates and ignored clear warning signs. However, in April 2017, 3 of the guards won their jobs back after an Ontario Grievance Settlement Board ruled that their actions were part of this long-standing systemic failure at the jail. Now, the case also led to lawsuits against the detention center, with allegations that inmates' rights were routinely violated and that the facility had a long history of negligence. Cargus's family was devastated by the loss, and during the sentencing hearing, his grieving mother addressed George directly, saying,
I forgive you.
Despite her words, the tragic and preventable nature of the crime continued to raise concerns about the Canadian prison system's ability to protect its inmates.
Well, yeah, that's fucked up. Beat him unrecognizable. The court said this is the most brutal crime or brutal beating, murder that they had ever seen. Seems like this dude was pummeled to death, unrecognizable. And he said he was upset over a phone call and took it out on his Celly and beat him to death. Wow.
31-year-old Jaime Osuna, covered in tattoos, including one of a cynic Joker smile, known for his reprehensible behavior toward his victim's family, is once again a murder suspect.
2017, Jaime Osuna was sentenced to life imprisonment for the brutal murder of Yvette Pena. Unknown to anybody, though, this was only the beginning of Osuna's shocking crimes, as what he did to his cellmate in prison would send a chill down anyone's spine. Jaime's early life was obviously marked by very disturbing behavior, but also a growing fascination with violence. From a young age, he exhibited cruel tendencies, torturing and killing animals. In an interview, he admitted that as a child, he would put cats in freezers and ovens just to watch them suffer. His violent nature only escalated as he got older. By the time he was 13, he claimed to have already committed murder. These early warning signs went
Put a cat in the oven just to watch it suffer. This is a sick individual. I would never do nothing. I could imagine that, putting a cat in the oven or anybody in the oven. Well, I guess you do when you're cooking chicken or something, but the animal's already fucking dead. I mean, damn. You're putting the animal in the freezer and all this, and he said he caught a murder when he was 13. Started real young.
Unchecked, allowing Osuna to continue his path toward becoming one of the most brutal killers in the U.S. prison system. November 13, 2011, police in Bakersfield, California, discovered the body of Yvette Pena in a room at the El Morocco Motel. This poor woman was tortured and stabbed multiple times. Osuna later admitted that he had met Pena once before and then returned the next night to kill her simply because he had the opportunity.
I did sadistically, premeditatedly, deliberately tortured and murdered Yvette Pena.
He relished in her suffering, using knives and scissors to inflict extreme pain before ending her life. This crime was so gruesome that even seasoned detectives were horrified. 5 days later, police around the apartment Osuna was staying at and arrested him. 2017, Osuna pleads guilty to all charges, including first-degree murder. During his sentencing hearing, he displayed no remorse. He would mock Pena's grieving family, smiling and even wiggling his fingers at him as he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Osuna also openly admitted to being sadistic and stated that he enjoyed torturing others.
I don't have no sympathy. I'm sadistic. I really don't care. I'll do it and I'll do it again over and over and over.
Over time, you could recognize Osuna with his face-covered tattoos. The most striking is that extended Joker-like smile carved across his cheeks. This eerie design, combined with sinister markings, reinforced that sadistic persona and the chilling nature of his crime. By 2019, Osuna had been transferred to Courtroom State Prison, where he continued to display violent and sadistic behavior.
It's not Cochran, it's Corcoran. I was there. Corcoran State Prison, okay. So I'm trying to see if this individual was killed or if he killed his Celly. I'm guessing he's the one that killed his Celly.
But despite the red flags, officials placed another inmate, Luis Romero, in his cell. Romero had spent nearly 3 decades in prison for a murder he committed as a teenager in LA. But unlike Osuna, Romero had a chance at parole and was preparing for his possible release. How could he have possibly known that his new cellmate was ready to carry out the most brutal murder ever witnessed inside a prison? March 9, 2019, Osuna proved that his words about committing murder, if given the chance, were not empty threats. That morning, guards at Courtroom State Prison made a horrific discovery. They found his cellmate, Luis Romero. Osuna had viciously killed his cellmate in an attack that was nothing short of sadistic. In footage too gruesome to show, he would use razor-style blades attached to a handle to slowly torture Romero for hours, ensuring that his suffering was prolonged. Authorities believed that Romero remained conscious for at least part of the ordeal, forced to endure unimaginable pain. Osuna would first slash at his cellmate repeatedly, and then cut deep into his flesh. Next, he removed an eye, severed a finger, and even sliced out a portion of Romero's lung. So if that's not gruesome enough, Osuna then sliced open his victim's face on either side of his mouth to create a grotesque, extended smile similar to the tattoos that covered his own. As the hours passed, the violence only escalated. In a final act of horror, Osuna beheads Romero, severing his head completely from his body. He then posed the corpse in a gruesome display and used the severed body parts to fashion a necklace, which he wore proudly. Jesus. Now, one of the most disgusting and disturbing things behind this was how prison...
Jesus is right. This is bananas. So this man done cut this man up, cut his fingers off. I'm always shocked. I'm always wondering how this happens with a knife, man. Obviously, he must have incapacitated him. Maybe he was asleep at the time. Because I always feel like you can, obviously against a gun, you don't have a chance. But against a knife, I feel like you can defend yourself. How does someone stab you 50 times? You know, obviously they get you somewhere good and weaken you from the beginning. You start losing blood and you can't really defend yourself or something. Because how is he just sitting there torturing this individual for hours upon hours? What is he just doing? Laying there saying, okay, torture me, cut me up? This is script, but he didn't knocked his dome off. He didn't, damn. Now, that took exercise, that took strength, that took time, that took deliberation. He doesn't have a machete in there. He doesn't have a big, sharp thing. He has some razors he can put together, a little handle. How long is that going to take to get somebody's whole thing off? That takes work. Where are the police at? This is crazy.
Guards failed to notice anything. They would do routine rounds and reported that both men were alive. The cell bars had been covered with a white sheet, concealing the horror within. And by the time guards finally checked inside, well, the damage had been done. The words, "ha ha ha," had been written on the wall using Romero's own blood. It's pretty sick. So when confronted with that crime, obviously Osuna displayed no regret, showing no remorse, no shame, but only the same twisted satisfaction he'd exhibited during his previous sentencing. So following this, a lot of questions arose about how this could actually go undetected. The California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation came under scrutiny for failing to monitor Osuna properly. The fact that this sick bastard was able to carry such a prolonged and brutal killing without any intervention is pretty freaking disturbing. But in addition to this, Romero's family filed a lawsuit arguing that the prison had been totally negligent by placing their loved one in the same cell as this known sadist. Attorney Justin Sterling, representing Romero's mother, criticized the system, saying it was disheartening that she had to sue just to get basic answers about her son's death. The brutality of this murder shocked even veteran prosecutors. Kings County Executive Assistant District Attorney Phil Esbenshade called it the most heinous slaying he'd ever encountered. The level of cruelty and methodical torture set Osuna apart from even the most hardened criminals. But despite the overwhelming evidence against him, Osuna's legal case took an unexpected turn. A judge ruled that he had suffered from schizophrenia and antisocial personality disorder, which made him incompetent to participate in his legal proceedings. Shortly after, he was transferred to a psychiatric inpatient program at Salinas Valley State Prison, where he remains to this day. For a lot of people, this outcome was infuriating. Romero's family, already grieving an unimaginable loss, now had to accept that this man who had murdered their loved one in cold blood would not be held fully accountable. October 2023, Tyler Grants, an inmate at Orange County Jail, was charged with involuntary manslaughter of his cellmate, Maurice King. March 20th, a jailhouse incident involves 4 inmates, Tyler Grants, Linwood Stevens, DeJuan Salters, and Daryl Bradford Jr., who were all involved in the violent attack on Maurice King inside the Orange County Jail, making headlines. Now, these inmates had different criminal backgrounds and reasons for incarceration, but their coordinated actions led to this brutal assault that was partially captured on surveillance footage. 22-year-old Tyler Grants has his own history of arrests. March 5th, 2019, Grants is arrested and charged with possession of a stolen firearm, possession with intent to distribute cocaine and oxycodone, and discharging a firearm during a drug trafficking crime. Now, the arrest came after he fired at a North Carolina state trooper who tried stopping him for speeding. Driving a stolen vehicle, Grants crashed into the New Hope exit off I-40 and then fled on foot, firing again at the trooper. The manhunt soon followed, and authorities captured him over 3 miles from the crash site. He had an assault rifle, a bunch of cocaine and oxycodone, cash, packaging materials, and digital scales. So on February 2020, a jury convicted him after a 3-day trial, and he was sentenced to 30 years in prison, followed by 5 years of supervised release. Now, that's what we know about Grants. Little information has been publicly released about Stevens, Salters, and Bradford. Also, none of the 4 were known to have any prior connection to King outside the jail. Their involvement in this attack only became clear after surveillance was reviewed and witnesses were interviewed in the following weeks and months. The victim, Maurice King, was a 34-year-old father of 3 and a Durham native. Now, he had a troubled past with convictions for his own drug offenses, firearm possession, and indecent liberties with a child. Held on federal drug trafficking charges and had recently entered a guilty plea. Federal records show that Maurice had been declared incompetent at one point due to his intellectual disabilities and also had a history of mental illness. But the case resumed after he was deemed fit to stand trial. Now, despite the criminal charges he faced, his family describes him as a loving father and son. In fact, his mother, Tiffany King, believed that her son would have been released soon based on time served. But this was not to be. March 4th, 2020, surveillance captures a chilling sequence of events. At approximately 6:38 p.m., King is seen talking to Grants in the common area of the pod. After some conversation, King beckoned Grants, and the 2 walked to King's cell on the upper tier. And as they entered, Grants closed the door behind him. Moments later,
so clearly he's calling them out for a fade. He's calling them out for a fight. He's telling them, come on. And he goes to his cell. I don't want to think for him or speak for him, but he may be thinking that he's not going to follow him up there. He's not going to take that fight. He may be thinking a little skinny white dude is not going to take the fight. I don't know. I don't know what the argument is about. I don't know what's going on. But I can see that he's calling him out for a fade. And Tyler Grants, the white guy, skinny, took him up on a fade. He followed him up to the cell and went up there and closed the door. Now, as we know, he wasn't alone. He was alone at that time, but perhaps he went up there knowing he had backup. They were all about to attack this individual. Looks like 4 of them total attacked him. Let's see.
Stevens and Salters followed and entered the cell. A 4th inmate, later identified as Bradford, quickly approached and shut the door behind him. The video shows that the 3 inmates, Stevens, Salters, and Bradford, exited the cell shortly after. Grants, however, stayed inside for about 6 minutes before leaving. One of the others then closed King's cell door again. Now, we didn't get to see what happened inside there, but the outcome was devastating. Roughly 90 minutes later, detention officers began to realize something's wrong. The officer on duty that evening passed by King's cell several times without looking inside. even as surveillance footage shows that the cell door had been closed by other inmates. This officer later admitted to having second thoughts after hearing a noise in the cell. And when he finally returned and went inside, King was found laying down, soaking wet, with visible swelling and bleeding of the left eye, complaining of shortness of breath and aches and pains throughout his body. One of the very inmates who had earlier entered King's cell helped carry him now down the stairs and into a wheelchair, where he was taken to the jail's nurse. King then tells paramedics that he'd been stomped and choked. The nurse immediately calls for an ambulance, but King had died shortly after in the emergency room at Duke Hospital after going into cardiac arrest. An autopsy showed that his face had taken multiple blows, which likely triggered heart failure, worsened by his weight and asthma. Not long after, this investigation into the killing was set in motion, and it showed some major gaps in supervision. Detention officers had failed to look into King's cell during routine checks, violating state regulations that require cell checks at least twice an hour. A report from the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services also confirmed these failures.
So once again, we see the police not doing their job. As in the first situation, they're passing by the cells, but they're not looking in. I'm not saying that's necessarily a bad thing, because people are in there doing stuff. They don't want the police looking inside of their cells. But I'm just saying that because of that, people are losing their lives. That's it. They said it was helped on by his asthma and his weight condition. But I don't know. I'm curious to see what part the other three individuals played or allegedly played inside of the cell. He was beaten, but he was alive. He was walking out with assistance. What happened in there?
Sheriff Charles Blackwood acknowledged that the checks weren't done properly, but also claimed that they didn't directly contribute to King's death. Well, in May 2021, Tiffany King had filed a federal lawsuit against the sheriff and 9 other staff members, alleging that their failure to supervise creates an environment where violence could go unchecked. The suit accuses detention officers of ceding control of the jail pod to one of the inmates and failing to provide immediate medical care to her son. Blood was later found on the floor, walls, and cell door, and it would take officers around 40 minutes to remove King from that cell after noticing he was in distress. The lawsuit also says that they gave control to an inmate who had such control over other inmates that they wouldn't even take showers without his permission. October 2023. The Orange Chatham District Attorney's Office charged Tyler Grants with involuntary manslaughter months after initially deciding against prosecution. His trial is, however, still pending. The other 3 inmates, Stephen Salters and Bradford, were never charged. Authorities claim that there wasn't enough evidence to prove their intentions beyond a reasonable doubt, even though video shows a coordinated effort to isolate King. So, despite growing scrutiny, no further charges have been brought against jail staff or other inmates. The officers involved were disciplined, whatever that means, but not really suspended or demoted, which also means their punishments remain undisclosed under state personal laws. Maurice King's death is part of a troubling trend in North Carolina, because over the past few years...
So they clearly got away with that, so he's still waiting to go to trial. That means he's never going to trial. They're going to just drop the case, bro, eventually. They haven't even filed the case necessarily. He's not even going to trial. I mean, they filed manslaughter charges on him, but it is yet to go to trial. After all of these years, it's not going to trial. They're going to drop the case.
Violent inmate deaths and rising mortality rates in jails have really exposed serious flaws in supervision and accountability. King's case is one of at least 3 in the state in a 2-year period where inmates died at the hands of others, and detention officers failed to do their jobs properly.
A Georgia inmate beaten and stabbed, the attack caught on camera and shared on social media.
April 2023. 4 inmates inside Smith State Prison carry out a brutal attack on their cellmate, Troy Castleberry, and recorded the entire assault on video. The footage later spreading across social media would show Castleberry sitting on the floor of his cell, hands tied behind his back, as he was beaten, kicked, and stabbed repeatedly. The 4 would take turns striking him, showing no hesitation nor mercy. One of them initially held the camera, recording the attack before joining in himself. The violence escalates to the point where one of them pulls out a shank and stabs Castleberry as the others continue to strike him. The inmates involved in this attack were already known for their violent behavior within the prison. You see, at Smith State, we have gang activity and corruption like crazy, and it has become a breeding ground for these kind of assaults. In fact, the prison had recently made headlines back in February 2023 when its warden, Brian Adams, was arrested on RICO charges, bribery, false statements, and violation of oath by a public officer. So in this environment where brutality often goes unpunished, these 4 sadistic inmates acted with confidence, knowing that chaos rules within this prison. Now, Castleberry, who was serving an 18-year sentence for armed robbery in DeKalb County, had been transferred to Smith State just 1 week before this attack. On the night of April 7th, 2023, he's in his cell, injured and restrained when the assault began. The video, lasting about 1 minute and 18 seconds, captures every detail of the attack. He's punched, kicked, and slapped in the face, throat, and chest as he struggles to remain conscious. Blood's pouring out of his mouth, and his attackers are showing no signs of stopping. So it's at this point that an inmate who'd been recording soon decides to take part in this sick shit, stepping forward to strike Castleberry himself. At the same time, another one pulls out a shank and drives it into Castleberry's shoulder and upper arm 4 times. As he groaned in pain, they roll him over onto his stomach and continue the stabbing, delivering 7 more wounds to his back. The video cuts off as the stabbing continues, leaving viewers horrified at the level of violence they had just witnessed. So when the footage started circulating on social
That's crazy, and that's why they're trying to get these phones out of prison. They didn't stab them up, and they recording it and putting it all on the internet. Damn. Hit him in the shoulder 4 times, stabbed him in the back. I'm wondering what he did. He's in there for robbery, so his crime does not warrant this sort of treatment. He's not a chomo or nothing, or at least he's not in there for that, unless they have some sort of past or have some sort of knowledge about his past indiscretions that he's not arrested for. I don't know. Other than that, it could just be that he came into their jail. They said he arrived a week earlier, like he just came in there and got into it with one of them in the cell or whatever, and they all just attacked him. And that looks like the actual footage right there, the actual video where the individual's tied up. They see the old boy pulling out the burner and about to go at him. Oh, man. 4 of them attacked him, brutalized him, and obviously killed him.
Media, many believed Castleberry had been killed. His own brother, Tyrone Bell, received messages from people expressing condolences. His mother, Doreen Castleberry, was also desperate for answers, but the prison refused to give any information about his condition. The wonderful Georgia Department of Corrections only issued a short statement saying that they were investigating the incident, while the Castleberry family remains in the dark about whether he'd survived or received medical care. Smith State's prison had already been under scrutiny following the warden's arrest, but this new attack proved how dangerous this place was. The 4 inmates who attacked him had been able to carry out their assault without fear of intervention. Aside from that, the fact that the attack was recorded and shared so openly showed just how little control the prison actually has over its inmates. Castleberry's family immediately pushed for him to be transferred to a safer facility, fearing that if he stayed there, he wouldn't survive another attack. His mother also said that her son's attack wasn't an isolated incident, as she believed that other inmates could be facing similar abuse. But despite their fears, Castleberry remains at Smith State Prison. Once healed, he's expected to return to that same environment where his attackers were still housed. However, despite the brutality of that attack and how viral the video went, the fate of these 4 inmates remains unknown. But we're supposed to feel okay because the Georgia Department of Corrections says that they're investigating in a place that's overrun by corruption and violence. We think justice is pretty uncertain. Still, Castleberry's family continues to fight for his safety, knowing that if nothing changes, the next attack may be fatal. In addition to this, there was also a petition to have Castleberry released from prison with 778 verified signatures. It is, however, unknown whether Georgia cares about this petition or not.
Well, I can answer that. The answer is no, they don't care about that. So he survived the attack then, apparently. Bless him, thankful for him. Thankful for that, fortunate for him. I'm still unclear as to why they attacked him in this such of a brutal fashion. Stabbed multiple times, tied up, but I mean, clearly if they wanted to kill him, they could have, because there was no intervention. No one had stopped the attack. Apparently they stopped themselves at some point. They just said, okay, this is enough. And maybe they thought he was dead because they stabbed him a lot of times, but he just did not die. But I'm sure they could have determined, oh no, hold on, this dude not dead. I mean, they right there, he's not dead. And they could have finished him if they was just hell-bent on killing him. But at the same time, one stab wound can kill you. So you can still make the argument that they were trying to kill him because they stabbed him multiple times. Yeah, I don't know, it's crazy.
The murder of Takaya sparked outrage across the city, and community activists say tonight that outrage on the outside may have spilled over inside the jail too.
February 11th, 2017. Antoine Jones fires 12 shots aiming at a group of a rival gang, but accidentally hits Takia Holmes in the process. Now, little did he know that his 71-year sentence wouldn't be the end to his punishment, as he soon came to realize. February 15th, 2017. Renard Williams is facing murder charges and made headlines for a violent incident inside the Cook County Jail. Though little is known about his early life, by the time he entered jail, Williams had become deeply involved within the criminal world, leading to a serious charge that would likely keep him behind bars for decades. While awaiting the next steps in his own murder case, Williams became known not for his own alleged crime, but for a brutal jailhouse attack that was caught on camera and widely circulated. Surveillance video from the Layton Criminal Courthouse captured Williams launching a violent assault on another inmate, 19-year-old Antoine Jones. Now, Antoine Jones grew up in Chicago, and like many young men in troubled neighborhoods, he found himself entangled in gang culture. Though few details are publicly known about his childhood, by the age of 19, he was already immersed in the violent realities of street life. His involvement in gang activity and drug-related turf disputes would soon result in one of the most heartbreaking crimes in the city's recent memory: the fatal shooting of Takia Holmes. February 11th, 2017. Jones is aiming at rival gang members selling marijuana near 65th Street and King Drive when he fires multiple shots from his gun. But instead of hitting his intended targets, a stray bullet struck Takia Holmes in the head while she sat in a parked minivan with her mother. The child just attended a birthday party and was innocently enjoying time with her family. Poor girl died 3 days later in a hospital, her death sending shockwaves across the city, igniting outrage amongst residents and community activists. Jones was quickly arrested and charged with first-degree.
He basically showed the Klan right there, talking about, but that's crazy though. See, and that's why I don't like them drive-bys. I never believed in drive-bys. I don't like violence, period. I don't support violence, period. But, you know, you're so tough and you want to get your man and you're so violent, then go get your man. How you just out here spraying bullets everywhere and hit a 7-year-old girl and take her life? That's not tough. That's not good, man. Damn. Crazy, man. What happened? Is he the one? Let's see what happened.
Murder and attempted murder. Prosecutors presented evidence that he fired at least 12 shots that night, each bullet representing a decision that ultimately claimed an innocent life. At the time of the attack, Jones was sitting slumped in a chair, his wrist handcuffed to another chair, apparently waiting for his bond hearing. And without warning, Williams charged toward him and began throwing punches, landing several direct hits to Jones' face until a sheriff's deputy quickly intervened. The entire assault lasted only a few seconds, but had a lasting impact. You see, Williams had just returned from his own court appearance and wasn't handcuffed when that attack occurred. Authorities said Williams received a disciplinary ticket for that incident, but didn't face new charges related to the attack. The sheriff's department did not, however, confirm whether Williams knew who Jones was or if this assault was a response to Jones' widely publicized case. But despite the severity of that assault, Jones declined to press charges, and Williams remained in jail, awaiting the outcome of his original murder case. After the assault, Jones was immediately moved to protective custody, where he would stay to avoid further incidents. The attack would bring attention to the dangers of placing high-profile inmates in shared spaces, and would cause renewed conversation about violence within the jail system. The Cook County Sheriff's Office reviewed this incident, but no major changes to policy were announced. November 2023, Jones was found guilty on all counts and was sentenced to 3 months, later to 71 years in prison, 45 for the murder of Takia Holmes and 26 for the attempted murder. Both charges included additional years due to the use of a firearm.
Wow, that was deep. Whew. Wow, that's damn. All right, so a 7-year-old girl, Takia, rest in peace to her, man. Condolences to her family. You know, you got to be careful, y'all out here spraying these damn weapons, shooting every fucking where, you tough guys. You know, but we can see that the guards there in prison are lax. They are relaxed. They don't do their jobs. You're on your own. You're on your own. You go to prison, you're on your own. If you think the guards are going to save you, we just see that's not happening. In both of those situations where the dude was killed, the guards done passed by, dude in there getting beat the fuck down to the point where he was unrecognizable. Had to have been screaming and everything else. No help. No guard help. They passed by itself. They ain't stopped nothing, didn't hear nothing, didn't see nothing. Kept going. This is what it is, bro. The black dude, Maurice King, in his cell, got beat down by 4 people. No charges. The guards in and out and passed back and forth. And still, after they noticed him in his cell in distress, it still took him 40 minutes to get him out of his cell, probably contributing to his death. Got to stay the fuck out of there, man. Period. Stay out of prison. Stay safe and stay free, people.